Beautiful morning, everybody. I am Dr. Victoria Gridman, and I'm here so happily with Randy Goldfarb. Randy, how are you today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, doing fabulous. I'm
Great.
doing great. I'm doing great. I love connecting with you about topics that matter for parents, for caregivers, for teachers, for schools. And this one today is really important. What's the best way to raise patient kids?
Yes.
Um, you know, Patience is a virtue and
Right.
it's a skill, right? Like it's not like,
Yes.
and we actually are not really patient ever in the beginning of life, right? Like I want it right now and I need to get it right now, right? So like instant
Right.
gratification sounds way better than having to be patient. But we know that patience is needed in the world
Yes.
we live in, right? So like why do
So
you
true.
feel it's important to raise patient kids? Why is patience such a needed skill to have?
Yeah, it is an important skill, and I like that you call it a skill because I think the assumption is that everybody's patient. And that's where a lot of impatience comes from, which we'll talk about. But it's actually backbone for many important life skills. It's part of how we build relationships. It's part of how we communicate. It's part of how we tolerate change. It's part of how we deal with things that are difficult. You need patience for all of those things. It's related to learning. It's related to everything, actually. So it's not just a virtue, it's like a must have critical life skill, especially in the world as it is today, where the world is not a patient place that we live in, really.
Yeah. I think a lot about some of the kids and clients I work with, and many of us have been touched by trauma, or many of us have had, experiences in our childhood that didn't really create an opportunity to learn how to be patient, which for
Right.
me means that there's like a space between what happens, our own recognition of our needs in the moment and wants and desires and like that impulse and then
Right.
responding versus reacting. When we're
Right.
impatient, I find that so many times we do things we don't mean, we say things we don't mean, we quickly get tempered and we get hot tempered and
Right.
want to get our needs met right now. But you're right, the
Right.
world doesn't always serve us in the way that we want. So how do we help kids create more space in their mind between the stimulus and their response so that they're not these like walking reactions to things, but that they are, beings that are able to kind of tolerate, as you said, the moment.
Right.
Yeah. Big, big, big topic. So,
Yes.
yeah, where do we even begin? How do
Where do we
we,
begin?
how do we raise patient kids? Well, I think, describe it like I think thinking about why it's so significant is number one. There are so many of us who ourselves are go, go, go. And because of that, yeah, right.
Right.
So because of that, we often, for children, whether we're parents or caregivers or family members, we often don't create or don't really nurture the opportunities
Yes.
that create the need for us to be patient or for kids to practice patience. We either do
Yes.
something for our kids or we fill the time with something else. And there's
Yes.
no waiting anymore. So then, when patience is necessary in a
It's
situation that we can't control, like the dental office or waiting online at Key Food or wherever you food shop, or waiting for something to come in the mail that's been ordered,
right.
we notice that when we can't control anything, we can become extremely impatient. So
Yeah.
the first thing is, I think, just talking a little bit more about like the importance of impressing upon children this skill, because otherwise, what would the future look like? Oh my goodness.
Right. It would be a mess.
It would be a mess. It would be a bunch of tantruming people all over the place. Like, I need my stuff met now. I need, what I need. And it doesn't matter what's going on around me. That's chaos.
Yes. Yes, and we do kind of have that around us, to be honest, Victoria. There is an element of that. And I think actually screens and screen time are a big piece of all of this. And for parents and caregivers and even teachers and therapists and all of us to really appreciate that screen time actually doesn't create opportunities for patients, for kids to practice and get used to, so that when they do need to be present, not on a screen, it's very hard to kind of gather their resources to be patient, because screens are like this alternate reality that doesn't reflect a process. It's, I play a game, I get my points, I either get out, I get in, whatever it is, and you want everything right away. And because that's how screen time really works. It is instant gratification. And that has increased the need for people to feel that they need to have instant gratification. And the fact that we're talking about this topic is really the first step of understanding that we are not just naturally gravitating to teaching patients and being patient. So that's really the first step, is taking the opportunities that we have and utilizing them as a way to experience patience. And when impatience is experienced, to start of see it for what it is. And the first thing I think about, how many times have we said to someone, can you hurry up? And how many times do parents or caregivers say to a child, can you hurry up? Or why aren't you paying attention? Or I asked you to do that 20 minutes ago and you didn't do it yet. Those are all patient related things where we are not showing patience, because we're not even realizing that that's something we need to model. And this is something we've talked about, I feel like is a little bit of a theme for us, is that one of the greatest ways to teach and raise patient kids is to model patience ourselves.
Yeah.
Because
and not all of us
parent,
You're so right. Yeah. So sorry to interject. I'm just excited about that concept and point that, yes, it's really empowering to know that we can do that. And it has been a theme, right, for us to talk about the significance of modeling those things. But that requires,
so let's talk about how.
Well, it requires us as adults to be aware of ourselves. Yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm. It always comes back to that.
Always. So how can we as adults become a little bit more conscious of those things?
Okay. So I would say, aside from modeling patience, because I think that's sort of the larger piece, it's what do we do to model patience, right? So as you mentioned, if you're in Key Food or wherever you shop and you're with a child, no matter what the age, you make a comment and say, wow, the line is really long. I guess we'll have to wait. And maybe you start a conversation about something as a way to teach, well, we can talk about something while we're waiting. In the classroom, I made up a song for my students out of nowhere, because that's what I do. I love making up songs because that teaches things. So with younger children, you could do that. And I would sing, and I will sing with my students, we're waiting patiently. we're waiting, we're calm as we can be. And they would know that when they got online, instead of focusing on where they're standing, who they're touching, what they're doing, they were busy singing, and I had them their hands and moving their body while we did that it taught you can do other things while you wait. Waiting is not a bad thing. It doesn't, we don't need things immediately. We survive by not getting things immediately. So it's modeling that, especially if you're on the line, even with an older kid, it's walking, say, there's a line. I wasn't expecting that. I was hoping we can get in and out pretty quickly. Well, and then maybe seeing what your child does, giving them an opportunity to initiate something. So that's one way of sort of saying this is trying to be cognizant. This is a situation where there's potential to make waiting a time of learning and opportunity instead of just being frustration that my needs are not being met.
I like that a lot. And for us as adults, like a tip I would have with that is, what are some of the things that we say we don't have time to do, and only if we had the time? Well, those 5 minutes waiting online, right, could be a mindful moment. It could be grounding yourself, putting your AirPods in and listening to, a YouTube inspirational video that, someone sent you. Thinking about 5 things that you're grateful for. Really
for sure,
taking the time to use that time in a productive way. And kind of like what you're talking about, reframing how we see what patience is and what it requires of us. I like that a lot. And you had a really great example with your son when you drove and you parked in a certain place.
Yes.
Further away. Can you share that with us? Because you shared that with me earlier, and I thought that was a really great example of reframing something for a kiddo.
Right. And it actually ties into patience 100%.
Totally.
What happened was we were parking for me to drop him off to camp. And I'm learning not to always try to get the closest spot, because sometimes that's more effort. And you know what? It's okay if you walk a few spots. I try doing that at the supermarket as well. It's less stressful because it's not as cluttered, when you park a few bits away from where you want to go. So I was parking a few bits from where we wanted to go. And my son said, can you just park close so we can get there faster? And I said, well, this is easier for me right now. And I said, what's the worst thing? I said, what's so bad about having a few extra steps of walking and talking with me before you start camp? And he looked at me and he's like, oh, yeah, okay. And that moment that could have been a potential, I want to hurry up and get to camp because I got to get there, turned into, wow, we can take this as an opportunity to chat a little bit more instead of running off and missing that extra little moment. And I think that definitely happened because I was in a mode of saying not everything has to be immediate, of reminding myself, slow down. Because as you were mentioning in the beginning, Victoria, I'm definitely one of those go, go, go. I like to do things. I like to make sure I'm being productive and get things done. And sometimes we forget to utilize that time and space in a productive, conscious way.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And what you did was you also showed him a different emotion that goes along with having to wait or having to have something be prolonged, instead of that being, and I'm always thinking neurologically, like neuroplasticity, right? Like, what's the stimulus? What's the response that's hooked together? And for a lot of kids, having to wait is hooked in with like impatience and frustration. But if we're able to create situations where we can take an opportunity that's challenging, but make it an opportunity to have another feeling come up, like a feeling of joy, a feeling of excitement, a feeling of fun, then,
And that's
the fact that and the fact that we have some more time is like, woohoo, more time. Yes. That's great, right?
Right. And it's the same thing when you're online for something or you're sitting in traffic.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Same thing. Instead of being like, oh, there's so much traffic, this is so annoying. It's saying, wow, there's a lot of traffic. It's going to take longer than I thought. What should we do? That opens up the opportunity again. And I think it also teaches not just perspective taking, because seeing things perspective, like you said, but it's also teaching about expectations and adaptability and tolerance, which is all related to patience.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if you expect that everything is going to always be given to me right away or done for me right away, then it's a recipe for challenge. But if you start to change your communication style about your expectations are not that everything has to be immediate, that's teaching your child adaptability. And it's also allowing you to be adaptable. And I want to share an example that I think really brings this home, that I experience often in the classroom and I experience as a parent. Imagine a young child coming over to you. You're in the middle of story time or an activity, where you want everyone's attention, and the child comes over to you, their shoe has come undone, and they stick their foot kind of in your hands. Right? That is, to me, reflective of a child expecting immediate gratification. I don't even have to use words. I just come to you and show you that my shoe is untied, and the grown-up is going to say, oh my goodness, I have to tie your shoe for you. Many times teachers or parents will, to expedite things, they'll just do it because it's quick and easier. What if in that moment the teacher or the adult said, what are you doing? What's happening? Is there, do you have a question? Is there something you need? And then it comes into an opportunity where a child can start to see, hey, I can actually get my own needs met myself. I don't necessarily need someone else to do it. And it doesn't have to be that second because you're showing them. Which is, and you can really take that same idea and apply it to other children at older ages.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And what you're bringing up is so important. And I have so much compassion for all the stages of parenthood and all the stages of parenting that need to take place, because when children are babies, we are doing all those things for them.
Yes. And we should.
And we should, right? And then what we're saying is that developmental stages create different developmental needs. And there comes a point in time when, the world, while it was all about you, is now no longer going to cater to you. So as you're growing and becoming more verbal and mobile and independent in certain ways, the world is going to cater to you less. And I think that transition is not just hard for the developing kid, but it's also tough for some parents who are used to, right, having this identity of parenting, right? This identity, of a mother or a father or a caregiver as someone who does all the things and is that one superhero. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a process, what we're talking about, of really consistently shifting. And at the moment you feel like you got it, it changes, right? And so constantly staying in tune with what does this stage of development need? And patience is always there. The need to create space and be able to tolerate it. So I like that a lot, those examples.
And Victoria, it reminds me, as that, it shows me the next step that I think is really helpful for parents in raising patient kids and for all of us to grow our patience, is actually expressing our gratitude over small things, not just big things, because that actually starts to help the tolerance level of seeing the value of incremental shifts or changes that are beneficial, and allows you to acknowledge that there's a change happening, especially as a parent. You know, for a child who may come over to you and put their foot out expecting you're going to change it because that's what they used to do and they weren't verbal or capable. It's that moment of saying, wow, it's amazing. You can actually use your words now. How do I help you in this situation? What do you need right now? What are you asking me to do? And it's saying, you know, and or, wow, I remember I just showed you put on your shoe by yourself, but this part's still hard. Okay, let's figure it out together. You know, an older child, let's say they're doing homework or trying to do a puzzle and they're frustrated and they're just like, it's too hard for me. There's a moment to say, you know, you were trying to do it, and that's pretty great that you did. And you know what? Those kind of things are frustrating. How can we tackle this? You know, and I think it lends itself to that, you know, honoring the struggle as a parent and as a child. We're all developing constantly, and we do need to shift as we acquire more skills. And the gratitude, I think, really kind of holds the space while that's all happening, when it may not be so easy. You know, and sometimes I'll even say to a child, sometimes I'll go and do something because that's sort of what you're still used to, even when they can do it. And I'll say, oh my goodness, silly me. I forgot that's something you could probably do. Okay, you know, maybe next time, where you want to do it over and see how it goes, you know, as a way to acknowledge that it's okay. I might still want to do things for you, and that's not a bad thing, but I also want you to experience your opportunities too.
Yeah, I like that so much, right? Sometimes like catching yourself and saying, wait a minute, you can do this, right? I really wanted to, but like, let's see, like I've left, right? And I think that that's important to acknowledge that as kids are growing, so are you. And it's not like you're caught up, right? And so it goes back to just having a lot of compassion and breaking this stuff down a little bit. I don't think all of us think about this before children come into the picture, because we kind of set ourselves up in a way where it works. But now with having a child that you're raising, all of this basic life stuff needs to come back, you know, into the conversation. Yeah. Because it's very, it's the skeleton of how to get along in this world. And patience is certainly one of those things that we need. I love it, love it, love it. Yes. This is a great conversation. Any last things that you wanted to share before we said goodbye?
I remember.
If there's a little technical.
Yes, so that's actually the share. Ooh.
Go ahead, Randy.
Are we good?
Yeah.
We're good?
We're good.
Okay. Something I wanted to share that I think is very worthwhile reframe in the idea of patience, that speaks to sort of what kids are used to, and then kind of they learn from that. So we know that especially with younger children, there's a lot of focus on taking turns, right? And that's often where a lot of the impatience may come, because we have to take turns. And for me, when I think about a child and a young child and how their brain is evolving with language and stuff like that, taking turns means something is being taken away from me, and now I have to wait. So what I speak about is actually, it's time to give turns. That it's an opportunity of a different way of looking at it. We give turns because that's like the kindness and the patience and the politeness of really what we're talking about. it's not that someone's taking something from me and now I don't get to have it. It's that I'm saying I'm giving someone else this bicycle because it's their time to use it, and then they're going to give me the bicycle my turn to have it. And that's a core, I think, reframing that is so important for young children, because I find parents in general, we're so focused on that our children have to do what's right, and teachers, you have to take turns. That's like a standard. I think if we frame many things as we're giving time instead of taking time, that shift actually can really like create an enormous shift that sort of really strengthens the bones and the skeleton. You know,
I like that a lot. Yeah, absolutely.
That really is like the backdrop.
Yeah. Yeah, language is so important. So that recommendation is a really great one. So instead of just taking your turn, you're also giving someone their own turn, which really encompasses the compassion, the gratitude, the appreciation for another, the ability to see another, right? I like that a lot. Awesome, Randy. Thank you. Thank you for this amazing conversation that we just had. It was an incredible one. And it was so good. And we're going to be back in a couple of weeks with another conversation. So if anyone enjoyed this, if you're watching now or this is a replay for you, type into the chat. Let us know in the comments what you liked, what you agreed with, what you didn't agree with, what was there for you about it. We always like to hear it. And if you'd like to reach out to Randy or myself, you can do that. We're all over social media. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye, everybody. Bye.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sure.